What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the third person and action RPG tutorial series, we are going to be going over NPC interactions part 2, and really just NPCs part 2. So in the first episode we were able to come over to this character, press the interact button to get them to perform an animation, and then press the interact button again to have them exit the animation and return to their idle. I want to move the logic that we set up in the previous episode to code to be able to modify it more today, as well as add matching character states, so we can track when the character is in the interaction with NPC state. And lastly, we're going to stop them from doing other things when they're interacting, such as being able to move, attack, and other things like that. So if you want to get caught up in the series and see everything that we have going on here, from our cutscene that plays at the start, to our weapons and interaction system, then feel free to click this icon in the top right corner right here to check out all of the episodes in the entire third person action RPG playlist. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you only care about the interaction with NPCs, I will link you to the first episode here, which is where we initially set up the behavior for the NPC, as well as their animations and spawning behavior. With that all out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be modifying things from the blueprint, putting them in code. So let's actually go ahead and look at the blueprint we made in the previous one first. So I'm going to go to my third person character blueprint, which is my base character BP. And in my base character BP, this is the character I was playing as, I had behavior in this event called Interact Blueprint. Handling interaction behavior for all of my weapons, items, armor, all that good stuff, but then afterward it was handling interaction for our base NPC. I want to move this over to code. It's not very complicated, so it will be pretty quick, but all these nodes that we set up for the initial interaction in the previous episode are going to be moved into the code, and I'm going to start by doing that now. So we need to get the overlapping actors and either loop through them or pull the first index and make sure it is a base NPC, and then if it is, determine if that NPC is interacting. If they are, we want to exit interaction when we press this button, which is the interact button. If they're not, we want to start interacting with them, just like this. So I'm disconnecting this behavior from my interact BP because I don't want to get a false positive thinking our code is working when really the blueprint is working. So I've disconnected it, it's not plugged in, we can actually remove it, but feel free to keep it for reference until we know the code is working. At this point, I'm going to close the editor and go into the code. Now we're in the code. Specifically, I want to go to my third person tutorial character.cpp, which is the parent to my base character blueprint. The first thing we want to do in here is include our base npc.h file, specifically so we can use it when determining what we're overlapping with, as well as call functions on it like enter and exit interaction. So as the bottom include in third person tutorial character.cpp, I am including base npc.h, which is my code base npc class here. Now once we've done this, let's go down to our interact function. For me, that is just called interact, and it is right here. So void a third person tutorial character : interact. In here we were making sure the menu wasn't open and we're not currently dead. If both those things were true, we were calling interact BP, which was handling the blueprint interaction logic. We didn't really have any code interaction logic. In today's episode, we're adding everything highlighted here, and again, this is going to be what was in the blueprint interact BP event or function. So first things first, we need to get all the overlapping NPCs. Really, we're getting all overlapping actors, and we're filtering based on if it's a base NPC or not. And to do this, we use TArray of actor pointers, so basically an array of actors. And I've called this overlapping NPCs because we are going to be filtering for just NPCs right now. But just think of this as the actors we're overlapping with. Then directly below that, I call get overlapping actors, which is an Unreal function. It's actually the same one that we were using in the blueprint. It's the same function that that node was calling. In the code version, we need to pass an array that is going to receive all the overlapping actors that this function returns. That's why we need to make this TArray right above it. So pass in our overlapping NPC, and additionally you can pass in a class filter in both the blueprint and the code version of get overlapping actors. So we're going to pass in a filter of a base NPC : static class. So essentially only find overlapping actors that are of type base NPC and return them into overlapping NPCs. So now this array should be filled out. We need to make sure that there is at least one overlapping NPC. If not, we want to just disregard all this logic. So if overlapping NPCs.num is greater than 0, we can assume there's one overlapping NPC or more. In the blueprint, we were actually doing a for each loop and looping through all of them. Really, right now, I just want to use the first index that we find. We'll have a different method very soon for both equipment and NPCs on determining which item we really want to interact with. So for now, we're just going to get the first one. We are going to check to see if this overlapping actor is an NPC. Now remember that getOverlappingActors, this function right here, returns data into this array of actors, regardless of the filter. So filtering by base NPC doesn't automatically convert this array to a base NPC array. It's still an actor array, and the getOverlappingActors function requires it to be that way. So we still need to cast our results that we get to the class that we actually want to check for. So if AutoNPC equals cast a base NPC overlapping NPCs index 0. What we're doing here is using overlapping NPCs at index 0, or the first index, so really the first NPC that we're overlapping with, and we're casting that from an actor to our base NPC class. Now this should definitely succeed, but I put it within an if statement just to make sure that we don't crash in case it doesn't. Assuming it succeeds, this NPC variable will be filled out. At this point, we need to determine if we're already interacting with the NPC. If we are, we want to exit the interaction with them. If we're not, we want to enter interaction with them. However, in the previous episode, our base NPC.h only had this boolean is interacting. Now, it's useful for this NPC to have that variable so we know if it's interacting with the player or not. It is in the protected view here. And so what that means is only itself and children classes can actually access this variable. Yes, you could just move it into public, but that's not really good programming practice. We want to keep things in protected or private if we don't need to make them public. Instead, we can use a getter or an accessor. And the way we do that is just like this. This is something new we're adding for the base NPC. So this is the getter accessor for is interacting. And the way we set it up is like this. We have the return type of the variable that we're trying to access, which is a boolean. We can put whatever name we want really, but typically you just get and then something very similar to the name, if not exactly the name. So we're trying to get is interacting. So get is interacting. Parentheses. Now I'm going to do something that we haven't done before in this series, and that is do an inline function. Getters and setters are very, very simple functions that exist in C++ in general, whether you're using Unreal or not, and so they're easily identified by programmers. You don't necessarily need to go into the CPP file and make a function for it. You could go into CPP and make a new function, bool a base NPC : get is interacting, and return the variable is interacting. There's nothing wrong with this. However, again, getters and setters are so universal that they're easily put in one singular line in the header file, not take up space in the CPP file, since pretty much everyone knows what they're doing. It's typically very good practice to not do extra logic in these getters and setters. Getters should just return a value, and setters should just set a value. That's it. So after my parentheses, I put curly braces, return, and I return the variable I want, which is interacting, semicolon, and then end curly brace. Notice that the getter is public, but the variable itself is not. So we can call this function to return the value that we want from a different class. Now that we have that in place, we can go back to the third-person tutorial character and call it. So if NPC get is interacting, essentially if the NPC is interacting with the player or another character, if they are, we are going to end their interaction by calling NPC exit interaction. Right now, all that does is set is interacting to false on the NPC, which is enough, but we'll want to do more with it in the future. And I'm adding a new line here, which is to set the movement state of the third-person tutorial character, or the playable character, back to idle. See, in the previous episode, we never stopped the character from doing anything once they began interacting with the NPC, but once we start interacting with the NPC, we may want to be able to go into a dialogue with them, or something similar. It's not required, it does change on the game. There are games when you can just run up, talk to someone, and still walk away. Again, we're exiting interaction here, so a movement state is going back to e movement state : e_idle. In the third person tutorial character.h, I have this enum movement state, and I've added another variable for it today, which is interacting with NPC. That has a meta display name of interacting with NPC as well, just so we can understand what we're doing when we set it to this value in the blueprint. Now, once you add this enum in here, you can go back to the character class and we can go to an else statement. So if the NPC is not currently interacting, we will enter the else statement. And that means we want to enter interaction with this NPC. So NPC arrow enter interaction, which is going to set is interacting to be true. In this case, we are interacting with the NPC, so we want to set our movement state to be movement state : interacting with NPC. And that's all the behavior we're adding for today's episode in Interact. Now that we have all this set up, we want to make sure that our interacting with NPC is actually doing behavior that we want. So for today's episode specifically, if we're interacting with an NPC, I want to disable movement of the character, attacks from the character, and things like that. So let's scroll down through our functions and see what should not be able to happen when we're interacting with the NPC. You may not want them to turn or look either. I'm going to let that one be for now, because we're probably going to force the character to rotate toward the NPC as they're interacting with them. So I'm just going to ignore that until we cover that case. But moving, we definitely don't want to be able to move if we're interacting with the NPC. So we already have an if statement for that in here. If not is dead, and movement state is not equal to movement state : rolling. I'm going to add another one here. If movement state is not equal to movement state : interacting with NPC. I'm going to copy this entire and of this if statement. We are going to be using it a few times here. So this is move forward. We also have move right in our third person tutorial series, so we want to do it in the same if statement and move right. No forward or right movements, which also means no backward or left movements when we're interacting with the NPC. Scrolling down, we don't want to be able to jump if we're interacting with the NPC. We don't want them to be able to jump if they're dead either, and that's something we never added in this series, so we should add it now. So if not is dead, and movement state not equal to movement state : let's add rolling in here. Again, another thing that we probably should not be able to do while rolling. This is something you could do, but I'm going to disable it. And movement state not equal to movement state : interacting with NPC. Parenthesis, and then we're going to make sure super : jump is inside of that if statement. Now, stop jump is going to be the same thing. This is for if we release the jump button. We don't want to be able to stop jumping if we're in any of these states or if we're dead. So we'll go ahead and do that now. The sprint, we already have if not is dead, but we don't want to be able to sprint while interacting with the NPC. And again, we really don't want to be able to sprint if we're rolling either. So I'm going to take both of these conditions and add them. So now we can't sprint if we're rolling or interacting with an NPC. Stop sprinting is the same way. We don't want to be able to stop sprinting if we're dead or rolling or we're interacting with an NPC. So might as well update that now. Start crouching. We don't want to be able to crouch if we're dead, rolling, or interacting with an NPC. So let's go ahead and add this entire if statement in here as well. Additionally, we don't want to be able to stop crouching if these conditions are true. Start damage is a debug function. We don't really have to do anything with that. Now, take damage you could do if you're interacting with an NPC, unless you intentionally want them to be invincible when they are interacting with the NPC. That is genuinely up to you. I'll say we can take damage if we're interacting with an NPC. I will let them interrupt our conversation to damage me, so I'll leave it alone. Same with dying. If we are dead, I will allow that to interrupt our conversation or interaction with the NPC. Again, you could add it here if you want. Respawning, don't need to do anything for that. Start healing, again, another debug function, don't need to do anything for that. Heal. So this is not just a debug function, this is how we can actually get our health back. I don't have a problem with healing while interacting with the NPC or rolling. I'm going to leave that alone. Heal armor or repairing armor is the same deal. I think if we're repairing armor while we're rolling or interacting with an NPC, that's fine. Maybe we have an ability to do it over time, and I have no problem with doing that while interacting. Gain experience, same thing. We want to be able to do that while we're interacting with the NPC. Say we just turned in a quest with them. Maybe they want to give us experience for that, so don't want to disable anything there. Interact. Interacting while rolling is fine. I have no problem with that. You could disable it if you want. Interacting when already interacting with an NPC is also fine, because the interact button is how we actually stop interacting with the NPC early. And because of that, we are going to want to be able to do it while we're in the interacting with NPC state. Zoom in. So this is like aiming down sights with a weapon or looking closer using fine aim. This one I am going to disable when in the movement state of interacting with NPC. Rolling, it could be fine. You might want to be able to aim down sights while rolling, even if it's just looking closer. So I think that's okay. We want to make sure this says not equal to. And stop, zoom, or zoom out is the same deal. I'm not going to allow that when we're interacting with the NPC. Or again, you could. It is up to you. I'm going to say we can not allow that to happen and be fine. Alright, using first attack. So our character has multiple attacks they can use. Right now it's only really one attack, but the plan is to add more. I don't want them to be able to attack if they're interacting with the NPC. So I'm going to add that here. I'm not going to add rolling here because you may have a rolling attack you want to use. So I'm not going to outright disable that. Add to inventory isn't something the player really does. It just happens when they interact with things, so we don't have to do anything there. Enable stamina gain. Again, not something we have to add for. Depleted our stamina. Nope. Toggle lock on. So lock on is like forcing the character to look at the enemy or the object that we're locking onto. This is toggleable by the player, so we don't want to do that if the movement state is equal to that interaction with the NPC. But I'm going to allow it while rolling, so I'm just going to add this if statement here. And again, we want to say not equal to. I keep making that mistake. Movement state not equal to interacting with NPC. Change lock on target is the same deal. That is a button that the player presses, and if they're locked on, it can change to a different target. We probably will not want the character to be able to do that. We're not disabling their lock on when they go into the interact with NPC state, so they could still be locked on when they go into the NPC. We will want to disable that later, but that's okay. We have other episodes that can handle that, so for now I'm just going to make sure that we cannot change our lock on target if we are interacting with an NPC. Roll, if we want to be able to roll while we're interacting with an NPC, no. And we also don't want to do this if dead. So I do have a check in here to make sure we're not already rolling when pressing the roll button. But I'm going to add not is dead in here. We don't want to be able to roll if we're dead. And also, I'm not going to allow us to roll if we're interacting with that NPC. Toggle ping, so if we want to place a marker or a ping. I think this is okay to leave if we're dead. You could ping from your dying state. A lot of games allow that. I think it's okay to ping while we're rolling. Pinging while we're interacting is probably not required, so I'll go ahead and just wrap this whole thing in an if statement, and I'm going to say if not is menu open. I think we don't need to be able to ping if a menu is open either. And then additionally, inside of there, if movement state not equal to E movement state interacting with NPC. I don't think we need to be able to ping under any of those circumstances. Then the tick fires every frame, and we don't want to stop that if we're interacting with an NPC, so we are good to go here. But there is one thing we want to do in here. So in tick, we were checking to see if the character was not moving to reset their default state back to idle. But we also want to make sure they weren't rolling. We also don't want to reset them to idle if they're interacting with an NPC, because we want them to stay in that interaction state. So let's go ahead and add if movement state not equal to E movement state interacting with NPC. And now we can go ahead and launch the editor. Now the editor is open, we can come into the game, and if I go and interact with the NPC, I won't be able to move I can look around, I can't attack. If I go to interact with them again though, I will disable the interaction and then I can go back to my normal life. This is good because this is exactly what we want. This is one step closer to being able to have an actual interaction with an NPC. Once we lock all the player's movements, all that's left is to actually set up what we want the interaction between the player and the NPC to look like. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode and I hope it helped you with your NPCs and NPC interactions. If it did, please subscribe and consider joining the Patreon, YouTube membership, or Discord subscriptions to help support the channel further. Thanks again for all your love and support guys, it's really appreciated, and feel free to check out the benefits you get from subscribing to those tiers. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description, and that support is completely free. But anyway, guys, that's all I got for you, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.